Today's readings is from the feast day of Saint Scholastica, which may be different than what your book has, but it's also already in your book at the very bottom. This morning on the Mississippi coast, and I'm sure in New Orleans as well, as you walked out your house this morning, it was foggy. And preparing to drive over here from the Pastor Bay, St. Louis, as you know, along the whole coast, we have the train. So I could hear the train at a distance. And as I was preparing to drive here through the fog, I came to the train tracks. And when I got to the train tracks, I had to stop. I had to look. And I had to listen. Once I knew that it was clear, that I continued driving this way. You know, just because we hear something doesn't mean that we listen. I heard the train track from a distance, but when I got to the tracks, I better listen. If not, you know what would happen. Well, Saturday night here in this parish, you had a couples retreat, and the couple who gave the retreat were fantastic. The authors, their names escaped me, so I apologize for that. But they began with an exercise with the couple. You've been married a long time, and you hear each other, but then do you listen to each other? So the very first exercise, he says, think about something that you desire to do, regardless how crazy it might sound. Skydiving, deep sea diving, whatever it may be. And did you ever share that with your spouse? And then have your spouse ask you, why do you have this dream or desire? And listen to their answer. How often do we hear, but we don't listen? And especially at couples, the longer you're married, I'm presuming, because I've never been married, that you hear each other, but then you kind of not listen to each other, or perhaps what is really being said. It happens quite often. This year, 2026, the beginning of the year, I was in Medjugorje, and then I went to Rome. And as a priest, I had many experiences, especially the Mass and confession. Spent time praying, but for me, I had to work, and I had to participate as well, because every day I had to do Mass or hear confession. So it was not just a pilgrimage for me, but it was a working pilgrimage for me. So it reminds me of today's gospel with Martha and Mary. We hear how Martha is actually the one who welcomes Jesus. Not just Jesus, but his disciples. Because if you read early in the chapter of Luke, they come together as a group. So Martha's welcoming them to come in. And she knows, oh my God, I have a house full of people now. So I hope I have enough food, accommodations, and all the particulars I need, because 12, 13, or maybe even more people are now in our house. So she expects her sister Mary to help. But Mary instead reclines at the feet of Jesus, showing that she's a disciple. So Martha is burdened and anxious, like, how am I going to take care of all these guys? All these people are here. So she turns to Jesus and says, Lord, I need some help. You got a large group here. I need some help. And Jesus said, Martha, Mary chose the better part. I don't know about you, but if I was Martha, I would have said, well, honey, if you want to eat, you better give me some help. And I'm sure Mary probably did go and help her after. But the story says there's an ethics of being and an ethics of doing. You need both. So it reminded me of Medjugorje that I had to do the ethics of being and doing. I was still responsible for the pilgrimage tour that I went with, but I also had to spend time listening to the voice of God. So from doing Masses and hearing confessions daily, I had some time to walk around and really pray by myself. So behind the church, there's a cemetery behind the risen Lord statue, going towards the mountain. The whole time it was cold. It was raining. Heavy jackets, umbrella, almost the whole time. But it didn't matter because people still did what they had to do because we went there for the Lord. Went there for that relationship with Jesus that Mary was calling, come see your Savior, my son. So as I had time for myself, I walked near the cemetery. It was raining pretty heavy that day, and it was cold. So I walked to the cemetery, and I was praying my rosary, meditating about my ministry and all the people I promised to pray for and so forth. And I came to the tomb of one of the Franciscans, or the leaders of the parish in Medjugorje that had passed away. And there was a woman in a wheelchair there, no umbrella, with a raincoat, huddled together in a wheelchair. And you could tell that she was crippled, and she had some disabilities. So I was there praying my rosary and just barely murmuring my Hail Mary as I was kind of reflecting and thinking of everything. And then the next thing I know, within a minute or so, she goes, shh. And I'm thinking, who is she to tell me to shh? But instead I listened to her. In that moment, I stopped saying it verbally. I said it mentally. And I just glanced down and looked at her hands, which was folded, and it was praying. And you could tell that the years had been in her hands, but she looked young. Actually, I didn't even see her face. I just saw her hands. And she had her hands praying. And something struck me. It's like, this is a moment, Clyde. So I don't know why, I just leaned over and I took her hand and I kissed her head. And I just was quiet. Next thing I know, she reaches up and gives me a candy. And I just held the candy because I was in the part of my prayer when it said, Sweet Virgin Mary. And I'm thinking, wow, is this a sign from God? And I continued to remain quiet. And for the first time in that trip, I think I was listening. The silence was so loud that I noticed the clouds on the mountain. I noticed some of the trees were starting to bud with little white flowers. I could hear one bird in the distance chirping. I could almost hear the raindrops falling on the tombs and making a little splatter sound. And I was there for about 10, 15 minutes. I scooched over to her and I held my umbrella over her, thinking that I had to do a good deed or something. She didn't ask me, I just did it. Stayed there for a while. And then part of me said, okay, I need to go because I have another obligation to go. As I walked away, I went, I think that was an amazing, special moment. She taught me that I was been hearing everything that's going on, but perhaps I wasn't really listening. And she made me listen in the silence with a shh. And that was an amazing moment to me. In many ways, that's what this hymn is about. We can hear something, but it doesn't mean that we're listening. And when I think about Saint Scholastica and the example that's given to us in the 6th century, little is really known about her early life. Saint Scholastica and her twin brother, Saint Benedict, were accustomed to visiting each other once a year in a farmhouse because Scholastica was not permitted inside the men's monastery. One day she came as usual and with her brother spent the whole day praising God and talking of sacred things. As night fell, they had supper together. Their spiritual conversation went on, and the hour grew late. Scholastica, sensing her death was close at hand, begged her brother Benedict to stay with him. Please do not leave me tonight, she said. Let us go on until morning talking about our spiritual life. Benedict refused the request because he did not want to break his own rule by spending a night outside of the monastery. When she heard her brother refuse her request, she joined her hands on the table, laid her head on them, and began to pray, asking God to let her brother remain. As she raised her head from the table, there were such brilliant flashes of lightning, such great peals of thunder, and such a heavy downpour of rain that Benedict could not return to his monastery. Benedict cried out, "May God forgive you, sister. What have you done?" "Well," she answered, "I asked you, and you would not listen. So I asked my God, and he did listen. So now go off if you can, leave me and return to your monastery." Reluctantly, as he was to stay against his own will, he remained with his sister. 3 days later, Benedict was looking up to the sky. He saw his sister's soul leave her body in the form of a dove and fly up to the secret places of heaven. My brothers and sisters, it's not surprising that she was more effective than he, since as St. John says, God is love. It was absolutely right that she could do more as she loved more. She who loved more could do more because she just didn't hear, she listened. There's a difference between hearing and listening. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Are we good listeners? At home, watching YouTube, do you listen to what's really being said? Do we open our hearts to God and say, Lord, let me listen, not just with my ears, but with my heart? You know, when I left that woman in Medjugorje that was at the tomb, she was praying, the one who gave me the candy and told me to shh. I thank her because she helped me to listen to my experience, how God has been active in touching me in my life. Instead of being so busy like Martha and Mary, take time to sit down and meditate. Meditate. And think about how wonderful life is. With everything that comes our way, difficulties, struggles, whatever, we never give up because God's with us. I invite you to spend some time quietly just to listen. Listen to the silence and how loud it is. It's wonderful.